This, I think, should be your choice if you're looking for 1999 movies about relationship bets over Cruel Intentions. I will just say...
Welcome to Recotopia, a happy home for recommended movies, shows, and music from two people you can definitely trust. Trustability varies by region, no guarantees implied. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron Dicer and Jeremy Scott.
Just bring me some cereal.
That cereal is full of unhealthy ingredients. I threw it away.
Don't throw away my stuff.
Frank, that cereal is for children. Enjoy this grapefruit.
You're for children, stupid.
Hello, everybody. I was getting a phone call and looking down. It's episode 83 of Recotopia. I am Jeremy Scott.
And I'm Dicer.
And welcome to the chat, turning out this week and every week to watch and chime in while we record this episode live, where anything can go wrong at a moment's notice. This week's big recommend, brought to you by me, is Robot and Frank. But before we dive into that, it's time for the small recommends. Aaron, did you bring any wee tiny little recommends?
It's no big deal.
Itty bitty living space.
It's so small and light.
It's small, it's tiny, it's petite, it's wee.
I brought a couple for you. Let's start with the TV show. I want to talk a little bit about Ahsoka. I'm really enjoying it. It's easy to, I think, boil down and minimize why I'm enjoying this show to the fact that, you know, Jedi fights and lightsabers, like it's back. Like, you know, one of the things I fell in love with about Star Wars as a kid were the lightsaber battles, the Jedi doing cool stuff, the Force pushes, like all that kind of stuff. And Star Wars, I think rightly so, has tried to broaden beyond and go a little bit, look, it's not all about Jedis and lightsabers. Like there's all this world building that can go on, you know, with this universe. And The Mandalorian has been a good example of that. There is certainly some Force stuff in the Mandalorian with Jin Grogu or whatever his name is at this point. But Ahsoka is kind of that, you know, thing. Now, I have a familiarity with the source material. I have watched Rebels and Clone Wars, and so I know where these characters come from. I think this show does something interesting where it doesn't babysit people who haven't watched Rebels and Clone Wars. I say interesting because I don't know that it's good. I think it makes it a little less accessible. I would guess a little less accessible for people who haven't watched Rebels. There is some expositional laying down of some tracks, but there's just so much more to be gleaned if you know the history of these characters and what's come before this. So it's getting to an interesting place. I think there are 2 episodes left, and I wanted to come on and say how much I'm enjoying the show before it ruins it the last couple episodes, because that seems to be the pattern with these Marvel and Star Wars shows is like they never stick the landing. I'm hoping this one sticks the landing, but I'm having a really good time.
I have completely checked out of Star Wars. Yeah. Like, I feel bad about it. I really do. But I didn't enjoy the prequels. I still don't. I thought Force Awakens was kind of fun, even though walking out of the theater, I knew it was just A New Hope with a different coat of paint. Didn't like either of the next 2 films. Haven't watched any of the shows. I don't know anything about Clone Wars or Rebels. So this doesn't move the needle for me, which is sad. And I've heard Andor is incredible, and I may give that one a go.
Andor's great, and that you don't really have to have. I mean, it's fine if you know the movie that he made as well, which is the name's slipping my brain right now. Which is one of the better Star Wars movies they've made aside from the
did he make the get the plans for the Death Star girl?
Yes,
Rebel,
I can't believe I can't remember the name of that movie.
Forrest Whitaker protectee.
You got it. You got it. Yes.
Rogue One. Thank you, Slap. This is why the chat is important.
It is. It really is, because our aging brains are just having trouble grasping things. So yeah, Rogue One. If you have like Rogue One in your mind, it does make Andor maybe a little bit more interesting, but it is. Man, it's high quality television making, whether it was Star Wars or not. There's some great stuff in Andor.
Interesting.
That you might enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just some stuff I just like. Okay, so Netflix has this new show called One Piece that's based on an anime. That's I think popular with every single person in the world except for me. I don't know anything about any of it. And I'm like, I see headlines that are like, you don't need to know the anime to get into the show. And I'm like, the show looks on the surface like something I need an encyclopedia. Like,
Right.
anyway, I'm just accepting that I'm getting older and some stuff I'm just not going to like. And I want people who like stuff to like stuff. And
well, this is stuff I like. I like Ahsoka. I'm really enjoying it.
I'm glad to hear. I do like that actress.
Rosario Dawson.
Aging Brains. We should subtitle this show. This could be Recotopia, Aging Brains. Something that I like that I've discovered recently, and occasionally I will recommend to you guys an Instagram account, and I have a new one to recommend today called Cooking for Levi. This may be worth signing up for Instagram alone. I don't know what Instagram is to you if you're not on that platform. Before I ever joined it, it was like photographs, and I didn't have any real interest in just a photo app. But at this point, it seems mostly for my consumption a video sharing app. And Cooking for Levi is a very experienced Michelin caliber chef who cooks for his 2-year-old, sorry. And here are the reasons that these videos are great. The cooking, the videos are short. They're like maybe a minute long because he edits them down. But the cooking is so elevated and high quality. There's even a video of Gordon Ramsay watching one of these videos, and it blows his mind that this dad is this good of a chef. The second reason is that Levi is one of the most adorable children I've ever seen in my life. And he will, in the middle of eating, hold things up and go, does this have protein? Why aren't you eating any? And every episode starts with him asking, what do you want to eat? And then the kid says this long, complicated dish like quail, sous vide, or whatever. He's like 2. It's just if I need a palate cleanser, if I need some like eye bleach from bad news on the internet or something, I go and watch these videos. They just warm my heart. I wish I could cook like this. But anyway, that's my first small recommend. Instagram, Cooking for Levi. I don't think you'll be disappointed at all.
I looked when I was researching this to find images and that kind of stuff. I was looking through some of the videos, and they are absolutely adorable. And it's nice when a great concept just works. Like, it's a great concept. Feed your 2-year-old high-level cuisine, right? Like, it's an elevator pitch that just works. What does a 2-year-old do when he eats something from a fancy restaurant or whatever? And yeah, it works. It just works.
It does.
It's good stuff. Let's talk about a movie for my second small recommend. It's been out for a while, but just recently arrived on digital. Past Lives is the movie. This is a debut feature from this director, and I've heard her talk a little bit about her experience making the movie. And it's garnering some of the first Oscar buzz of the season, it's one of the first movies that came out in 2023 where people were like, watch out for this one come, later in this year. And I totally understand why. It is absolutely, it's one of those movies that grabs you because you just find yourself immediately invested in the emotional storytelling, the decisions that these characters are making and why they are making these decisions. The idea of the movie is basically that Nora, who was born and raised for a few years in Korea, ends up moving to the United States with her family when she's very young. But she had a friend, a boy friend, who was, as they were kids, pre-adolescence or whatever, loved hanging out together and had a good time. She moves to the US and they separate, but then they reconnect later on once technology allows Skyping, those kind of things when they're older. And then she ends up marrying an American, and several years down the road, this guy from Korea comes to visit, and all of a sudden we are left with this idea of how the past impacts our present, and whether and what is, how does she see this relationship? What is this relationship to her? What is it to him? I found this movie to be very open and honest and modern about how it views relationships and what they are. I found the conundrums that our characters are facing, all three of the main characters, interesting, worth talking about. It is one of those kind of movies that if you're going to go see it with somebody, especially somebody that you're in a relationship with, you might want to schedule dinner afterwards to go have deep, meaningful conversations about, your relationship and how you see other people and, people who are meaningful to you outside of your relationships. And is that love? And what kind of love is that? Like, there's all of these really interesting, beautiful things to explore in past lives. The performances are great. I was hooked every single second. Didn't need a single lightsaber to be excited about this one. So it's a lot of
I
fun.
read the synopsis for this and was immediately interested in seeing it. And I do know, for those of you who are hooked by Aaron's small recommend, that you can pay to watch this at home on Amazon and probably other streaming services. But yeah, good one. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to go back to 1999 for my second small recommend, a movie that I recaught over the weekend. Arguably the most 1999 movie of all time, 10 Things I Hate About You. This movie introduced most people to Heath Ledger. You've also got Julia Stiles and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, very young. David Krumholtz is in this, very young, even though he's much older than he's playing in this movie. And this is a retelling of Taming of the Shrew in a modern era. Julia Stiles is the main character, and the premise is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt wants to date her younger sister, but the younger sister's not allowed to date until the older sister is dating, and the older sister hates men. And so they hire Heath Ledger's character to woo Julia Stiles and date her. They pay him to take her on a date. And of course, over time, they eventually fall in love with each other. This is just, I don't know. It's like, I feel like I go back in time when I watch this movie. I say it's the most 1999 movie of all time, not just because of the humor, but the whole aesthetic, the way the movie is put together, the music breaks. There's Letters to Cleo music in this movie, left and right, which is a band that I was familiar with and fond of back when this movie came out, but it's very 1999 sound musically. It's another, it goes right there with She's All That. That would be an excellent double feature, take you back in time. And they both have very humorous fathers of the main female character. So there you go. 10 Things I Hate About You. You can watch this movie now on Disney Plus or on MGM Plus, or you can rent it in other places.
This, I think, should be your choice if you're looking for 1999 movies about relationship bets over Cruel Intentions. I will just say.
You have to tell everybody that you got to tell everybody the journey.
I just recently not only watched Cruel Intentions, but also two other movies based on that same work, Dangerous Liaisons and Valmont, I think is the other one. So I watched them in order of release and had various thoughts about all of them. But I will land on, I did not enjoy Cruel Intentions whatsoever. I think the movie is terrible.
It's no good. I did tell you going in, but I respect that you still watched it because you're a man that commits to a thing. And
and I've said this before, and I'll say it again now. I'm not sorry I watched it. Like, that's not right. I'm glad that I now have my own understanding and view of this movie. Just because I dislike a movie, or in this case, think it's terrible, or whatever I might say, doesn't mean I very rarely say, boy, I'd like to get that 2 hours back. No, I'm glad I invested that 2 hours in something I hated.
At least now you know how Ryan Phillippe and Reese Witherspoon fell in love. Like,
yes,
that was the movie, from my understanding, where their relationship began. So,
yes.
Anyway, it's time now for our big recommend.
I'm fine. It's just that you're so big.
It's so huge.
It's a good rule, but this is bigger than rules.
It's bigger on the inside.
Is it? I noticed.
This week's big recommend is Robot and Frank. Charming little movie with some heady themes about identity and memory and I'm excited to dive into it. We open on what feels like a break-in, and we see Frank Langella's character, Frank. It's not hard to play a character by the same name. Actually, no, that was a terrible thing to say. It's hard to play characters, but it's easier when it. Never mind.
That's like as long as the character has the same name as you, acting's easy.
Acting's easy.
Super easy.
Super easy thing. So it feels like he's breaking in. He picks up a photograph and then drops it. And we zoom in on the photograph, and it's a younger version of him and two children. In real life, by the way, that's actually a photo from Frank Langella's actual life and his two kids. We then cut to him the next day, seemingly cleaning up the same room. And he puts the picture into a safe that he's got behind a painting. I guess it's not a safe because he just pulls the painting open. It's like a hidden cubby or what have you. He pours some cereal into them, but he pours some cereal to eat, but the milk is sour. Then he goes into town. He appears to briefly get lost, and we're starting to see that he's got some kind of dementia. And I don't think the film ever spells out if it's Alzheimer's or what. But he has lost some of his memory. He goes to the library and hits on the librarian for a little bit. This feels like something he's done before. His son calls, he goes outside and he says, "Leave me alone. I'm going to go eat at Harry's." And his son says, "Harry's closed like ages ago." And he's like, "No, I was just there yesterday." And he turns around and it's now this like boutique that sells soaps and little figurines. And he goes in there and steals something. And the lady who owns it catches him. And all she does is threaten to call the police next time. And basically, she suggests that this has happened several times. And he is a memory-losing kleptomaniac, perhaps.
Anna Gasteyer, by the way, playing that shop owner, and hilarious in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. She doesn't get a lot of scenes, but she
No.
does a lot with them. She's
Yeah,
very
I agree.
talented. So he goes home. Actually, his son shows up on the road while he's on his way home, drives him home, and his son has brought him helper, butler, medical assistance robot thing. FYI, this is set in the near future. I should have told you that. The movie tells you that right out of the gate. Frank wants nothing to do with the robot, of course. I don't know that anyone in his situation would want a robot to come and help them, but the alternative looming appears to be some sort of assisted living home, and Frank is certainly not ready for that. So he grudgingly accepts the robot, and he's antagonistic towards it. He calls it names. The robot is just doing its job, doesn't have feelings, wakes him up early, gives him food that Frank doesn't want to eat because it's healthier. But eventually, the robot begins to endear himself slowly to Frank. He takes it with him to the library and then to the boutique where he nearly steals another knickknack, but puts it back just before he's caught. But on the walk home, looking through the bag, he discovers that the robot went and took the knickknack for him. And this is where a light bulb goes off for Frank, where he realizes this robot doesn't have any moral programming. He even has a conversation with him where he's like, "Do you have any programming that tells you can't break the law?" And he basically says no. And then we get a fun little sequence where Frank teaches the robot how to pick locks. And Frank tells him about his days as a jewel thief. He's done 2 prison stints, one for a bogus tax evasion thing and another for stealing something after that. He was a cat burglar. He steals jewels, highest dollar amount per ounce. And so he's going to basically make this robot his protege. So they begin to case the library because on a previous visit, Frank was shown a precious, priceless, old version of Don Quixote. And he knows the librarian loves it. And he has a thing for the librarian, so he's going to steal this book for her. And so they do. They go into the library overnight. They steal the really rare books that his librarian friend loved so much. And then we get this sad memory back at home where the robot or Frank is trying to remember whether a memory he's having was with his son or his daughter. And then he says to the robot, "Was that you or your sister?" And the movie keeps doing this. It will layer in doses of comedy, like when he tells the robot, if kids are bothering you, say self-destruct sequence initiated and count backwards from 10. And then it'll throw in these gut punches of, oh yeah, this man is slowly losing his world. Well, the library is being taken over, actually handed off to Jeremy Strong, who is this hip, modern community building guy who's going to turn the library into what sounds like a internet cafe, and they won't need all the physical books anymore. But he is so awkward to Frank. He keeps talking to Frank about, like, well, your generation is so important. You're our last ties to the written word. It's so condescending. And Frank is not so far gone that he can't tell it's condescending. And at a reception for the new library thing is where he decides that's going to be my next target. That guy is a dick, and he has a lot of money, and his wife has a lot of jewels, and I'm gonna steal them. So before he can do that, he does start casing the man's house. But before he can do that heist, we see a scene where the librarian comes for dinner that Frank has forgotten about. And he tells her, why don't you come back later? I'm working on it, when he's not remotely working on it. And we get the sense that this has happened before, as she sighs and puts her head on the screen door and then sets down the pie that she had brought for dinner, and then drives away. And it's another sign of how not only Frank's memory loss is costing him, but it's costing other people who are in his life. We constantly see his son and daughter visiting and calling. His daughter's Liv Tyler, his son is James Marsden. But hang on, I lost my place in my notes.
You just got distracted by the fact that his children are two famous actors, James Marsden and Liv Tyler.
The first two scenes Liv Tyler's in, you might feel like, boy, they probably got her cheap because she's only on video calls. But then the scene where
shows up in the movie,
she shows up and she whispers to the robot, and the robot shuts down. And early in the robot's existence in Frank's life, he wished for that word. He wanted to shut the robot down. He wanted the robot to have an off switch. But nobody told him the password. And so she is vehemently anti-robot. And it's kind of a fun notion. The movie doesn't really explore this as much as I might have preferred. But she comes, shuts the robot off, and says, I'm going to take care of you. Humans take care of humans. It's inhumane to have a robot do it. But it's only a few days before Frank realizes that she's turning the robot on at night to do all the cleaning. And he confronts her because this is, against her ethics. And he asks her to turn it back on, and she does. And he immediately sets about the heist to the library guy. What they steal, though, these jewels, Frank takes one look at them and says, this is way too hot. We're going to have to sit on this. So they decide to sit on it for however long until the heat goes down, and then they can presumably sell it. But the cops show up. Jeremy Sisto, one of two Jeremys in this movie, and yes, I will always notice when multiple Jeremys appear in a film. Jeremy Sisto shows up with Jeremy Strong, hipster library guy, who I'm not sure why he gets so much access in this investigation. And I'm also not sure why the cops walked in the front door all the way through Frank's house and came out the back door instead of walking around. But I'm not sinning this movie. I'm recommending it. And it seems pretty clear Frank, the major jewel thief, everybody knows is a jewel thief who lives just a mile or so down the road from this place where there was a major jewel theft, is probably the chief suspect. Hipster library guy is absolutely positive it's him. But they don't have any proof right now. That night, Frank starts burning evidence. He sees a van outside. He thinks he's being watched. And he starts behaving pretty erratically. And the robot gets concerned and repeatedly says, I think you should go lay down. I think we should call your son if you're not acting erratically. And then he has this idea, and a light bulb again. And Frank says, call my son and tell him I'm dying. And the robot says, I don't think you're dying. And he says, no, it'll get him up here. And so it works, Hunter, his son, shows up the next day, and we get kind of this faux lovely scene where Frank appears to be genuinely apologizing. He says, I know I wasn't there. as often as I should have been. And then the kid has this, do you remember our old apartment with that tiny little yard? And it's clear this is a magical memory for him.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank is like, yeah, that's great. Here's this thing I want you to hide from me. And just immediately goes into manipulation mode. The kid doesn't know what's going on, but he's given this satchel. And Frank just says, you have to go hide it immediately. And so he goes outside and puts it in his trunk, and the cops show up immediately. They were watching Frank's house. They've got him red-handed. They open the trunk, they dump out the satchel, and it's all the knickknacks he stole from the boutique. There are no jewels in here at all. And they decide they're going to search the house. Before they can, Frank comes out drinking some OJ, calm as hell, says, hey, you guys want to come inside? So they come inside, and they start turning the house upside down. And somewhere in here, Hunter realizes exactly what's happened. That he told the robot to lie. His dad isn't dying. He's walking around just fine. He's manipulated everybody in this scene, including the cops. And he's been using the robot to do his dirty work. And we get this kind of back and forth as he confronts his dad and tells him off, and the cops keep yelling at him. And then eventually they realize, oh, the robot has memories, and we can download his memories, and we'll catch him red-handed. And the robot says self-destruct sequence initiated and starts counting down from 10. Frank immediately runs out the front door. The cops aren't buying it until we get to about 3 or 2, and they're like, oh, crap, and they run out.
They have that moment of, if I'm wrong, I'm dead. I'd rather be wrong and alive.
Exactly. So while they're running outside, Frank steals his son's car, drives around back, picks up the robot, and they take off. And they have to lay low. So he goes to the library, which, of course, they already know how to break into. And they break in, and he goes to his librarian friend's office. And here we get, I think, perhaps the most impactful scene in the entire movie, where he's talking to her and admitting, hey, I'm kind of on the run from the cops. I'm a jewel thief. I'm gotten in trouble. And he's looking at pictures on the wall, and we start getting a look at the pictures on the wall, and we see that it's his kids and his kids with the librarian. And then he and the librarian together, and we realize before he does that she is his ex-wife. And he has completely forgotten her, even though she lives in the same town and he sees her every day. And he says, is this you? And she says, yes. And he says, is this me? And they share a kiss. And then I think a wave of emotions overcomes Frank. And he just leaves. And we cut to him and the robot walking back home. And he's like, we're going to have lunch, and then we're going to plan our next job. And he's already trying to shake off, I think, the pain that he has just experienced. They go home. Before the cops can grab him, he locks the front door. He knows they're going to be in any minute, so he starts tying sheets together so he can climb down the window, and the robot is finally able to break through to him and say, listen, dude, I'm not a person. The only way you get out of this is to wipe my memory. And so he finally accepts the truth. And I need to watch this movie 5 or 6 times to really understand everything it's trying to say about memory and memory loss between Frank and the robot. I think symbolically, Frank doesn't want to do this because it's like wiping his own memory. He's also come to be fond of the robot. And then one of the best visuals I've ever seen, Frank is sitting on the bed, and how do I do it? And the robot says there's a button back here, and leans forward so that in order to wipe the robot's memory, they're basically hugging each other. And then we cut. Obviously, some time has passed, and Frank is in one of those homes, I guess, that he never really wanted to be in. We see his son come to visit him. Initially, he doesn't recognize him. Then he goes back to the House Princeton thing that he's used to asking his son, even though his son hasn't been at Princeton in 30 years. His son leads him out. They go down some stairs, and his daughter and his ex-wife are waiting for him, and they go out and have a picnic. And it's just a lovely moment because everybody finally is happy. And he seems to know he's with family. even if he doesn't have the specific memories that he wished he had. And then they say goodbye, and he walks back to his room, and he sees another old person coming around the corner with the robot just like his. And for a pause, he's like, is that my robot? And then another one goes by in the background, and he's like, no, that's not mine. And he goes into his room, and the credits roll. I do want to note the closing credits are pretty neat because it's all footage of robots doing everyday tasks, opening drawers, lifting people into hospital beds. And I think some of it is, maybe all of it is real robot footage. If not, they went to a great deal of
It's all real.
expense.
It's all real robot footage.
I figured
I
it
read
was
something
real.
about that. Yeah.
Aaron, I believe this was your first time through.
Yeah, I didn't even
Robot
know
and
this
Frank.
new movie existed until last week.
So, what was your experience like?
I will mention at the end, maybe I missed you saying so. He does mention something about the tomato garden, and we're led to believe that the diamonds are in the tomato garden. And his
I forgot that.
kids
Yeah, he
may,
hands his son a note when they're saying goodbye
right
at the very end, and I forgot to note that.
and that's kind of like the final reveal of, oh, maybe he got one over on him or whatever. I will say overall, I liked this movie. I have very mixed feelings on it. This is one of those great examples of why, with what we do with sinning movies and that kind of stuff, why we always say, just because a movie is sinful doesn't make it bad. This movie is very sin. There are a lot of things I don't buy in this movie. I think the reveal of the mom at the end is a little weird considering what we've seen before and how it, didn't come up and why a son's coming this far when the ex-wife lives this close and, all these, kind of things. It is one of the, this is a pet peeve of mine, so please forgive me. It's going to sound like I hate this movie for a second.
It already does.
It is one of the dumbest versions of the future I've ever seen. I was so distracted by the stupid transparent screens on everything and these giant clunky robots that would be no good, for anybody doing things that they have no right to be doing and would not have the ability to do. Dumb, tiny little skinny cars flying down the road. Like that's where we're headed. It was one of those things where
that tiny car is real.
It was real
in existence.
That's correct. It was real in 2012 when this movie came out because it's where we are now, not where we're headed with car transportation. It was one of those things where I was like, if her is on one end of the spectrum of like, this will be the future, this is on the other side of the spectrum. None of that kept me from enjoying the humanity of this movie. I think this movie is extremely human, extremely beautiful. I do have a question for you before I continue on.
Okay.
Do you feel the movie ever redeems or tries to redeem Frank?
No.
I don't think so either. And I find that very, very interesting because it has a great opportunity to. There is a way this movie ends that I think completely gives us another level into Frank. And that way is he refuses to wipe the memory of the robot and goes to jail even at his age and then, is moved to a care facility or whatever at some point in the future. Like that's the easy out for this movie, right? Is that it takes all these themes about memory and about his relationship with this non-living thing and how he's imbuing it with this idea of worth and value. And he says, no, I won't do that to you because it's happening to me. I refuse to wipe your memory. I'd rather go to jail. Like that's that's kind of the out of redemption for Frank or that kind of thing. But the movie doesn't go that route. The movie kind of lets him be a thief and not a great person to his family.
Well, and I think, so I have lots of thoughts to respond to that, and I'm not trying to cut off your response to the movie.
No, you get
I feel like if there's any redemption, it's maybe the son.
Sure.
Because I feel like at the end, he's finally able to just freely love his dad with none of the baggage. I think this movie came dangerously close to doing what you're talking about. If we don't see him wipe the robot's memory, and I don't even think we do.
I don't remember if we actually see him push the. He says, "I knew you had an off button," and then
I don't think he pushes the button in that scene. So when it cuts to the home, you could very easily have made that a prison home. Like, you could have had him walk out, picnic with his family, and then when they leave, see a bunch of razor wire on a fence and a guard tower. And I think that might have captured what you're looking for. And then somehow we reveal that the robot is still with
but
him.
I don't know the movie is worse off for it. I find it interesting, and one of the things when I don't need a film to redeem its central character. I don't need that to happen. What I need to happen is to have discussions and interesting thoughts and to feel something. And this movie accomplishes all of those things. So I don't.
The chat is saying he did press the button for sure.
Yeah,
so I just missed that.
So yes, I believe that is the case. So it's one of those interesting cases where the movie, I think, makes a pretty bold decision to just kind of let him be a thief by the end of it. And I don't know, there's something authentic about that. There's something real about that.
I go so far as to say the son character as presented in the movie is going to dig that stuff up and take it straight to the cops. Like,
could be, sure.
Like, morally, I don't get the sense that he's the kind of guy who would be like, Dad, got us some jewels. All right. Like, I feel like he's going to, at least there's a whole nother movie you could have here with him like staring at the garden, deciding maybe I should just leave it there. I don't know.
Right. I think this movie is, I think my one sentence review that I logged on Letterboxd last night is everywhere this movie fails with the technology, it succeeds with the humanity. And I think that's really, really important because I did feel connected to him and the aging, and you get a sense that this person has been so independent and so self-centered in many ways, not necessarily in a good way, that this idea of him losing himself is so painful because of how he has lived his life. So I found that really, really interesting. The Don Quixote thing is clearly thematic and beautiful, and the idea of seeing things that aren't real or not understanding what's really going on around you, doing a big last task. Like, I found all of that interesting. I found it humorous. I think the movie has great stretches of humor, just simple things like the robot saying that cereal is for children. Here's a grapefruit, and he says, "You're for children, stupid." Just like a classic kid insult at that. When they make the robots talk to each other, I thought that was really was really
Pretend
sweet.
that robot is a human and have a conversation with it.
Right? Yeah. There's one point, and it's just the delivery on this one, where I believe it's Frank. I don't think it's the robot. I think it's Frank who just goes, "Oh, planning this burglary was such a good idea." Just the way he says it just kind of made me laugh. I thought that was great. Jeremy Strong, man, what an actor. Like, I just, after watching him in Succession for a while and seeing him in some other things, it's really clear he's not afraid to really do character acting. And whether you buy the performance here or not, it's clearly a bit stereotypical one-note kind of stuff. I really find him interesting. And I wouldn't have really known who he was at this time if I had seen this.
Oh, me neither. But he's massively method. And I wrote a note, like, it's very humorous to me to picture him on set of this movie. Like, I don't know what his quote unquote method is, but staying in that character, even when he's not filming, that is a humorous notion to me, because that character is obnoxious. There's a lot of humor for me. There's a part where Frank, partway through the movie, turns to the robot and says, "You're starting to grow on me." And the robot says, "Thank you, Frank. It's time for your enema." And then there's a gut puncher of a line from James Marsden, who I think is sneaky good in this movie, where he's yelling at his dad and he says, "The best thing you ever did was being locked up so I didn't have to be raised by you." And I felt that was pretty powerful. And he has unexpected range in this movie. So
Yeah.
All right.
One final technology thing before we get to the next part.
We're going to end on a downer.
Listen, I have to say it. Just one sin before we move on. This high-tech family from the near future doesn't have a single camera in their house? Like, how is that even? Okay, anyways, continue. Move on.
Yeah. No, I don't get it. I get it. Oh, man. Yeah, okay, so I think it's time for the super secret double feature.
All right.
And that is your responsibility this week, so I'm curious to see what you brought.
Be very, very quiet.
Secret? What secret?
Our dirty little secret.
I tell you something I've never told anyone.
Love a lot of the suggestions. There are a lot of ways you can go with this, and the suggestions in the chat kind of go along with that. Moon with Sam Rockwell was mentioned. I think that's a really interesting one, kind of that solitary, trying to figure thing out with the robot. Catch Me If You Can was mentioned by somebody. Yeah, I can kind of see that.
Nice.
I went through, my mind lingered on robots for a while. I thought of her, decided not to go with her. There's a movie came out recently called After Yang that this reminded me of quite a bit, and it's about a family that has an android in this.
I love that movie.
Yeah. So that one kind of reminded me of this. I thought of A Man Called Otto, which is interesting because it deals again with, this idea of when you age and you disappear from your life and, you become solitary, and what is there out there to change that? But eventually went with a different Tom Hanks loner movie that actually does have a robot. I went with Finch. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see Finch, but it gives me a lot of these same feels of a robot who brings humanity to the people around them as it's learning what humanity is. This is clearly more apocalyptic that we're dealing with here. But basically, this is a robot whose sole purpose is to save Finch's dog. And that becomes a really interesting kind of plot point through the movie. I don't want to give too much away, but Hanks is great as usual. And I think this one's worth a watch. I think it just kind of flew under the pandemic radar a little bit, and
part of the thing is, isn't this an Apple Plus movie? Like,
yes.
Hanks has gone on a spree of making straight to streaming movies that I don't think I've seen. The only one I've seen was News of the World, which I liked quite a bit, but I haven't seen the boat one. I haven't.
The boat one's great. That's actually probably my favorite of that run.
Oh, really?
Greyhound, maybe, is that what it's
Greyhound.
called? Something?
Yeah. Haven't seen
it's
it.
good stuff.
All right, I'll take your word for it. And it certainly sounds like a movie that would make a good match for Robot and Frank. I'm surprised you didn't try and find a double feature that had really boxy, terrible future technology that annoyed you.
It's the transparent screens. Why would we ever want transparent screens? It's so dumb.
Hey, listen, you're preaching to the converted. I've been railing about holograms in movies for almost 11 years now.
Yeah.
All right. So you are now, the spotlight is on you for next week's homework and next week's big recommend. What are we all going to be watching?
We are going to watch a movie that is one of those movies that you may think is weird to put in the category of film, but I think this is a film. It is a produced... It is a produced version of a magician's show on Broadway. It is one of the most meaningful things I've ever seen. We're going to watch Derek Delgadio's In and of Itself.
Oh, you've raved about this to me before.
This is so good. And that's ultimately the reason why I want to go with it, even if it does kind of stretch the ideas of what a film is. It is feature length. It is directed by Frank Oz. It is absolutely a movie that thought was put into, how it came about. It was a show, I think off Broadway or on Broadway, that he did for a while. I think it will hold a lot of surprises if you've never seen it before, and I think will develop into a lot of interesting conversations. So Derek Delgadio's In and of Itself,
all right,
will be the movie for next week.
Pushing the boundaries here, Aaron. You're changing the definition of film on the show. And
I don't know. I think ultimately this fits into the idea of, it has a director. It's, I don't know. It'd be kind of like the Hamilton thing, but even closer to a film than that.
I'm already, now you got me planning to recommend Taylor Swift's Eras Tour whenever that comes out.
I like it. Let's do it. We'll do Recotopia live from the theater.
Speaking of that, I appreciate what she's doing, because she's going to give that concert experience to a bunch of fans that have never had it, because they couldn't afford the tickets. And she has already gone to the unions and met every stipulation that they had. Yeah, it got fuzzy for some reason for a second there. But they are encouraging people to clap, scream, sing along.
Yeah, be at the concert.
I pity the people in the next door auditorium.
This is coming from a theater manager point of view, right?
I mean, you almost have to schedule empty buffer auditoriums. There's going to be there's already an issue with nosebleed in most theaters when you have a bombastic action film next to a period piece or something, but this is going to be next level. I don't want anything to do with it.
I am fascinated by it. It is already, like, I was looking at the showings on my app locally. Most of them are already sold out for that first weekend. Like,
there are going to be people going to this over and over again, the way people went to Avengers Endgame over and over again. Yeah. She's a genius as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's knock out a few questions real quick before
Sure.
we all head to lunch, even though my stomach does not want to do any questions.
Question. I got something to say. I want the truth. I am listening.
What's a movie with a good third act, but the rest of the movie is just not good?
I'm gonna go with Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End for this answer. I really like just the energy and amazingness of that whole third act. But that movie is, any of those movies other than the first one just feel so shallow to me. So.
Okay, so forgive me. Which one is that?
Which one is At World's End?
Yes.
I'm not sure. What order do they go in? I always get confused, but I will look it up.
Is
I
this
think
the one with the giant whirlpool in the ocean and Chow
yes,
Yun-fat?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. So I think it's the third movie.
Yes,
and then
I think so.
Yeah. So, and I think it's like the second part of, weren't the second two shot at the same time and released consecutive years? Anyways, I just really like how that one ends. I think it's really cool and
they
interesting.
kept going after this one, and the next two is what made me not be able to tell any of them apart.
Yeah.
My answer here is basically an answer you gave recently for a similar question. It's The Phantom Menace, because that movie is slow and draggy and boring, and then we get to the big finale, and Lucas does his I'm going to jump between three big action sequences back and forth thing, and we get the best lightsaber battle ever. But yeah, up until then, it's a slog for me. I'll fast forward. I love this question. Using the Prey format, which horror villain are you dropping into what time and place?
I'm going to go, the villain I'm dropping in is whatever entity controls the Final Destination movies.
It's Death.
So Death, right? So Death is the villain, and I want to throw it into World War II era about somebody who managed to avoid going to the war that was going to die in the war, and go that route. So
Snap. Yeah. I kind of dig that. Although you'd have
or something in the, so like, the idea being, and you'd believe me, you'd have like tones to balance, right? Like the seriousness of war, and then the silliness and Looney Tunes-ness of Final Destination movies. But like if there was like a battalion that got diverted somehow that was supposed to be on Normandy or whatever, and then that battalion, fight. I foresee them fighting together to beat Death in some way or whatever, and losing a few of them along the way. But yeah. Anyways,
Slab says Alien during Christ's crucifixion. Slab.
fair
Going
enough.
to hell. I want to see colonial era Jaws. There you go. I want to see Pilgrims. I want to see Jamestown. I want to see people in the big tall hats. And they get eaten by a shark, and they have to use wood to kill it. I love this question. I do feel like if the Predator franchise doesn't do this, I think my fear is they're going to make a direct sequel to Prey, but I would rather see them jump to a completely different time and place and do what they did with Prey, with a different culture and different weapons and whatnot. Let's do one more, and then we'll go to lunch. You can go back to pre-IMAX years and choose one film to be retroactively shot and presented in IMAX. What do you choose?
Man, I mean, this one has an obvious answer for me, which is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It would be amazing to have seen what Peter Jackson would have done with that real estate, and would be incredible. So that's kind of the obvious answer, but I think I want to jump even a little further back to the past, to encourage Back to the Future to have been in IMAX. I think that would be a really fun one to see in the big sound, big format.
Somebody threw out Vertigo, and that feels perfect. Yep. Imagine what you could do with some of those visuals. Jurassic Park, that's another good one.
I saw a print of Vertigo on the big screen in Chicago when we were in college around there. They were doing a retrospective or something, and it was like one of those film experiences that just kind of just like, oh yeah, so I'm watching movies the rest of my life, kind of thing. So, yeah.
My answer here, I wanted to go with The Matrix because that's just easy to answer everything that way. But I'm going to go with Dances with Wolves, which is already a gorgeous movie, even before the age of HD. And I just feel like if some of those sweeping vistas, like, I don't want to give all the credit to Kevin Costner. I think that cinematographer was doing a lot of heavy lifting. But in IMAX, I think some of that would just be jaw-dropping. Oh, Kurosawa Samurai. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That's an also good answer. The chat, we want to thank you guys for chiming in and showing up and being snarky and friendly and helpful with the informations. You guys are awesome. Next week's homework is Derek Delgadio's In and of Itself. Aaron, off the top of your head, do you know if
it's on Hulu?
Streamable? It's on Hulu. All right.
It's on Hulu.
Everybody, we'll see you back here next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. For Aaron Dicer, this is Jeremy Scott. And see ya.
Bye.
Be a part of the live show by being a member of the Sin Club at Patreon at patreon.com/cinemasins. Chat with us on the Cinemasins Discord at discord.gg/cinemasins or Cinemasins Twitter at Cinemasins, and email any comments or questions to Recotopia at cinemasins.com. That's RECOTOPIA at cinemasins.com.